I never thought I'd be the kind of person who someone else felt safe sleeping next to, but there I was, lying awake while he drifted off like a kid who finally found a place to rest. It hit me right then, this weird mix of pride and protectiveness, and honestly, it caught me off guard. So, here's the deal. I met Jamie about 2 months ago at this little coffee shop in the city. It wasn't one of those cinematic meet cutes or anything fancy. He was just sitting at the corner table, headphones in, laptop open, completely focused. I was killing time before a meeting, and when I glanced over, I noticed his eyes flick up to check the door every now and then, like he was waiting for someone, or maybe just keeping an eye on the street. Something about that cautious look made me want to start a conversation. Turns out, Jamie is this guy who's had a rough patch with, well, pretty much everything about feeling safe, emotionally and physically. He's shy but has this quiet strength that you don't really notice until you spend some time with him. We started talking, and I found out he recently moved here from a small town where things were complicated, to say the least. He explained that he wasn't used to just feeling comfortable around people, but something about the city, or maybe just this coffee shop, made it a little easier. Over the weeks, our casual coffee chats turned into longer hangouts, and somehow, I ended up being the guy he trusted enough to hang out with late into the night. One of those nights, he showed up at my apartment after a late shift at work, exhausted, jittery, like he hadn't slept well in days. I offered him the couch, but he hesitated before saying, "Do you mind if I crash next to you? I don't feel safe sleeping alone right now." I wasn't sure how to react at first. Part of me wanted to joke about it, but the serious look in his eyes stopped me. We ended up sharing my bed, which, honestly, was awkward at first because we barely knew each other beyond the coffee shop banter. But as soon as the lights went off, he relaxed in a way I hadn't expected. He told me later that feeling my presence made the nightmares and anxiety fade, even if just a little. That night stuck with me because it wasn't just about sharing a bed. It was about him opening a door in a part of himself that he usually kept shut tight. And here I was, holding that space for him, realizing that maybe this connection was turning into something more than just friendship. The way he looked at me, the way he trusted me, it all felt heavy with something real. I still remember the morning light creeping through the blinds, hitting his face in this soft, almost vulnerable way. He smiled shyly and said, "Thanks for letting me stay. I don't think I've felt this safe in a long time." And honestly, neither had I. That's where things stand now. Between us, there's this fragile, growing trust that neither of us expected, but both needed. I'm not sure where it's going, but I know I want to find out. Because sometimes, the people who seem the most broken carry the most beautiful stories. And Jamie, he's already rewriting mine. After that morning, something shifted between us. It wasn't like we suddenly declared ourselves boyfriend and boyfriend, or even that we talked about what was happening. No, it was way more subtle than that. The kind of thing you only notice when you look back and realize everything changed in the quiet moments. We started spending more time together. Not in a forced way, like scheduling dates or whatever people do when they're dating, but just hanging out naturally. Sometimes Jamie would come over after work, and we'd cook something simple. He's surprisingly good at chopping veggies, by the way. And sometimes we'd just end up sitting on the couch, watching dumb YouTube videos or scrolling through playlists without saying much. Those small silences stopped feeling awkward. Instead, they became comfortable, like we didn't have to fill every second with noise to be okay. One night, maybe 2 weeks after that first night he stayed over, I noticed he was quieter than usual. We'd been watching a movie I didn't really care about, but I kept glancing over at him. He was fidgeting with his sleeve, eyes fixed on the screen but clearly somewhere else. "Hey," I said softly, leaning closer. "You okay?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah. Just tired, I guess." I didn't push, but then he surprised me by saying, I keep thinking about that night. How weird it was, crashing here like that." I shrugged. "I don't know, man. Sometimes you just need someone around. No big deal." He laughed quietly, but it sounded more like a release than amusement. "Yeah, well, I guess I've never really had that before. Someone, just being there without asking for anything, that hit me harder than I expected." I could tell he wasn't just talking about that night, but about a lot of things. The years of looking over his shoulder, the walls he built around himself, and how hard it was to let anyone in, Over the next few days, I found myself paying extra attention to the little things, like the way Jamie flinched when a door slammed somewhere nearby, or how he'd pause before answering a phone call, as if bracing for bad news. I didn't want to pry, but I wanted to be there, even if it was just to sit quietly next to him while he figured stuff out. One evening, a week later, we were walking back from that same coffee shop where we met. It was chilly, so I offered him my jacket. He took it with a small smile that made my stomach flip for reasons I couldn't explain. As we crossed the street, he suddenly stopped and looked up at me with this serious expression. "Can I tell you something?" "Sure," I said, matching his pace. He hesitated, searching my face like weighing the right words. I've never really had anyone I could be this honest with. I mean, I've got friends, but not like this. And it scares me a bit. I nodded because, yeah, I was pretty sure I felt the same way. I guess what I'm trying to say is, thank you for being patient with me, for not running away when things get messy. I reached out and bumped his shoulder lightly. You don't have to thank me. I'm not going anywhere. That night, when we got back to my place, Jamie lingered by the door longer than usual. Normally, he'd say something like, thanks, then head out, but this time, he looked uncertain, like he wanted to stay but was afraid to ask. I leaned against the doorframe and said, you can always stay if you want. No pressure, no weirdness. He looked down at his feet for a moment and then back at me, eyes softer now. I might take you up on that. That was the beginning of a new routine. Jamie started crashing more often, and with each night, I felt like the walls around him chipped away just a bit. Sometimes we'd talk until the early hours about everything and nothing, and other times we'd just lie there, sharing the quiet. One night I remember waking up because Jamie was gripping my hand tighter than usual. When I opened my eyes, he was staring at the ceiling, breathing unevenly. Bad dream? I whispered. He nodded, squeezing my hand again. Yeah, but it's better when you're here. Those words stayed with me. Better when I'm here. It wasn't just about physical safety. It was about feeling seen, accepted. And I realized I felt the same way when I was around him. A few weeks later, after a late shift, Jamie invited me back to his apartment. It was the first time I'd been there, and honestly, it surprised me. The place was small but cozy, with photos taped to the fridge and books stacked in corners. The walls were painted this muted blue, and there was this faint smell of vanilla candles. We sat on his couch, and he looked nervous, like he was about to say something important. I want you to see where I'm coming from, he said quietly. Not just the city, but everything else. I nodded, ready to listen. He took a deep breath and started talking about his family, about feeling like he never fit in, about the fear he'd carried for years. Hearing him open up like that made me want to hold him and tell him everything was going to be okay, even if I wasn't sure it was. When he finished, I just pulled him into a hug, and he didn't pull away. That night, I realized we weren't just two guys who happened to be close. We were building something fragile but real. A kind of safety net neither of us had before. And honestly, I'm still not sure where it's going, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. After that night at Jamie's apartment, things started to feel less like a slow, cautious dance and more like we were stepping into something real together, even if neither of us had a map. The awkward pauses and unspoken fears didn't disappear overnight, but they softened around the edges, replaced by moments that made me realize how much I wanted to be there for him, and maybe even more than that. A couple nights later, Jamie stayed over again. We were sprawled on my couch, half watching some documentary about space, or something neither of us really cared about. I was half focused on the TV, but I kept stealing glances at him. He looked so peaceful, the soft glow from the screen lighting up his face, his breathing steady. It was moments like these that made me think, maybe this is what normal looks like. Suddenly, Jamie shifted and turned to face me. You ever think about, I don't know, what comes next? He asked, voice low. I blinked, caught off guard. Next? Like, tomorrow? Next week? He shrugged. Yeah. Or, like, with people, relationships, trust, that kind of stuff. I smiled, thinking about how much we'd both been dancing around that territory. Honestly, I've been scared to think about it, I guess because I didn't want to get my hopes up. He nodded in understanding. Same. Feels like every time I let my guard down, something messes it all up. That honesty landed between us like a soft fist bump of shared experience. What if we just take it one day at a time? No expectations, just see how it goes? Jamie smiled, this genuine, small smile that made my chest tighten. Yeah, I'd like that. That night, when we finally crawled into bed, I noticed Jamie was quieter than usual. He reached out and took my hand, holding it like a lifeline. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, and I felt this strange mix of comfort and excitement. For a guy who'd spent so long feeling unsafe, he was daring to open up in a way that felt fragile and brave all at once. A few days later, I invited him out to dinner. We picked this little hole-in-the-wall taco joint that had accidental charm, paper napkins, neon signs, and a playlist that was mostly 80s pop. Jamie laughed more than I'd heard in a long time, and I swear it was the kind of sound that sticks with you. Halfway through the night, as we were sharing a plate of churros, Jamie looked at me with this slightly nervous energy. "Can I be totally honest?" I nodded. "Always." He took a deep breath. "I'm scared. Scared of getting hurt. Scared of messing this up. But I'm also scared of missing out on something good because I'm too afraid." It was like he was saying exactly what I had been feeling, but hadn't been able to put into words. "I get it," I said softly, "but we don't have to be perfect. Just real." He smiled, and I swear for a moment it felt like time paused. That night, walking back to my place with his hand slipping into mine, I realized that this us was starting to feel like home. But life, as it always does, threw a curveball soon after. Jamie got a call one evening, something to do with his old job back home. The kind of call that brought back memories he'd been trying to forget. His face went pale, and for the first time I saw that familiar flicker of fear return. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "Not yet. Maybe never. But I have to fly back for a day or two." It was a short trip, but it felt like a test. Would the walls go back up? Would the distance undo the fragile trust we'd built? The night before he left, we sat on my balcony, wrapped in blankets, watching the city lights blink to life. "Promise me something?" Jamie said. "Anything. Don't forget that this, us, it's real, even when I'm not here." I squeezed his hand. "I won't." He smiled, the kind of smile that held hope and fear all at once. "I'm scared, but I'm going to try." When he left the next morning, I felt this weird emptiness, like the space beside me was suddenly too big. I told myself it was just a few days, but the silence was loud. Halfway through the trip, Jamie texted me. Just a few words. "I miss feeling safe." My heart clenched. I wanted to be that for him, even from miles away. When he got back, we met at the same coffee shop where it all started. He looked tired, but relieved. "I'm sorry for disappearing like that," he said quietly. I shook my head. "You don't have to apologize. You handled more than I could imagine." He looked down, then back up, eyes serious. "I want to try harder. With you." I smiled, feeling the weight lift a little. "Me too." That night, as we shared my bed again, Jamie curled up close and I whispered, "You're safe here. With me." He sighed, the kind of sigh that feels like letting go. And for the first time, I truly believed it. Those first few weeks after Jamie got back felt like walking on a tightrope. We were both trying, but sometimes I could tell he was still wrestling with ghosts I couldn't see. One night, about a week after his return, we were sitting on my couch, the TV flickering some show neither of us was really paying attention to. Jamie was unusually quiet, his fingers tracing patterns on the armrest. "Hey," I said, nudging his knee gently. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, swallowing hard. "I've been thinking a lot about what safety really means." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Go on." He sighed, looking down at his hands. "I used to think it was just about not being hurt physically. But now, I'm realizing it's more than that. It's about feeling like you can be yourself, without pretending or hiding parts. Feeling like you're not constantly waiting for the next thing to break. That hit me harder than I expected. Sounds like you've been carrying way too much weight for a long time." "Yeah," he admitted. "And sometimes, even now, I worry that if I let myself feel safe, I'll get hurt even worse. I reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead. You don't have to carry that alone anymore. Not with me. His eyes met mine, vulnerable and hesitant. I want to believe that. I really do. From that night, I decided I wanted to be more intentional, not just letting things happen, but showing him, in little ways, that he could trust me. So the next day, I messaged him to meet up after work. We ended up at this small park nearby, the kind with a playground and a pond where ducks waddled around. We found an empty bench and sat side by side, the early spring air crisp, but not cold. Jamie was quieter than usual, but after a while, he started talking about things he'd never said out loud before, about his family, the things they said that chipped away at his confidence, about how he'd learned to hide who he was just to survive. Listening to him, I felt this mixture of heartbreak and admiration. It wasn't just about his struggles, it was about the strength it took for him to share it with me. When he finished, I reached for his hand, weaving our fingers together. Thank you for trusting me with that. He looked down at our hands, then back up, a shy smile tugging at his lips. I want to keep trying. With you. That sincerity made my heart swell. I squeezed his hand gently. Me too. Over the next few days, our connection deepened in ways I hadn't expected. We started making quiet plans. Things like cooking dinner together, exploring new parts of the city, trying out little coffee shops off the beaten path. It was all simple, but it felt like building a life, piece by piece. One evening, Jamie suggested we go to a poetry reading at a local bookstore. I wasn't sure what to expect, but seeing him light up as he listened, eyes sparkling with emotion, made me realize how much he craved moments that felt authentic and safe. After the reading, we walked back to my place under a sky full of stars. Jamie was unusually quiet, but when we reached my doorstep, he stopped and turned to me. There's something I've been meaning to say, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I held my breath. Yeah? He swallowed and looked down for a moment before meeting my gaze again. I don't just feel safe with you. I think I'm falling for you. My chest tightened, a rush of warmth flooding through me. I'm falling for you too. We stood there for a beat, letting the words sink in. Then, without thinking, I pulled him close, feeling his arms wrap around me. It wasn't a grand gesture, no fireworks or dramatic confessions. Just two people finding comfort in each other's embrace. But even as things felt good, I knew there were still parts of Jamie's past that shadowed him. One night, while we were lying in bed, he suddenly sat up, eyes wide in panic. I'm sorry, he gasped. I can't. I need some air. I followed him out to the balcony, where he paced back and forth, breathing hard. It's a nightmare, he said after a while. It comes out of nowhere. Makes me feel trapped again. I didn't know what to say at first, so I just stood there, letting him lean against me when he needed to. After a few minutes, he looked up, eyes tired but grateful. Thank you for not running. I smiled softly. I'm not going anywhere. Those moments were tough, but they made us stronger. Jamie started seeing a therapist, and I did my best to support him without pushing too hard. It was a balancing act, knowing when to give space and when to hold on tight. One weekend, we took a trip out to the countryside, just a short drive from the city, but a world away from the noise and stress. We rented a tiny cabin by a lake, no Wi-Fi, no distractions. On the first night, we sat by a campfire, the flames casting flickering shadows on our faces. Jamie was quieter than usual, staring into the fire. You okay? I asked. He nodded slowly. Yeah, it's just peaceful here. Makes me realize I want more moments like this, with you. I reached for his hand, lacing our fingers together. Then, let's have more. Over the next few days, we hiked through woods, cooked meals on a small stove, and talked about everything and nothing. It felt like we were building not just a relationship, but a sanctuary for both of us. On our last night, Jamie surprised me. He pulled out a small notebook and handed it to me. "I've been writing," he said shyly. "Poems, thoughts. It helps." I flipped through the pages, reading lines filled with hope, fear, and love. One piece stood out. "I found a place where I can breathe. In your arms, a quiet reprieve. Not just safe from the world's loud storm, but safe in you, my shelter, my warm." I looked up at him, eyes shining. "This is beautiful." He smiled, a little embarrassed. "You inspired it." That trip marked a turning point. We weren't just two people trying to heal. We were becoming something stronger together. Back in the city, life wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, moments when Jamie's anxiety hit hard, or when I struggled to be patient, but we faced them side by side. One rainy evening, as we curled up on the couch, Jamie looked at me and said, "Thank you for being my safe place." I pulled him close, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine. "And thank you for letting me be." In that moment, between the rain tapping on the windows and the quiet hum of the city, I realized that safety isn't just about absence of danger. It's about presence, the presence of someone who sees you, holds you, and chooses to stay. And with Jamie, I was ready to stay. After that rainy evening, things felt different between us. Not in a flashy, headline-making way, but in the quiet, everyday moments that suddenly mattered more. Jamie's words, "Thank you for being my safe place," stuck with me. I kept thinking about what that really meant. To be a safe place for someone, especially someone like Jamie, who'd spent years feeling anything but safe. I started paying more attention to the little ways I could show up for him, like making sure there was always a spare blanket around when he stayed over, or leaving the hallway light on when he came home late. Sometimes, it was as simple as sending a text midday, "Thinking of you, hope you're okay." Nothing big, nothing dramatic, just consistent. One Saturday, we woke up late, the sun pouring through the window, and I made us breakfast. Pancakes, scrambled eggs, the works. Jamie sat at the kitchen counter, watching me with this soft smile that made my heart flip every time. "You're really good at this," he said, taking a bite. I grinned. "Well, I had a lot of practice cooking for myself. You'd be surprised how many midnight snacks I've burnt." He laughed, and for a moment, the past felt miles away. After breakfast, we decided to wander around the neighborhood. There was this little used bookstore we'd never been to, tucked between a flower shop and a bakery. Inside, the smell of old paper and coffee mixed in a way that felt oddly comforting. Jamie ran his fingers along the spines of books, occasionally pulling one out and reading a passage aloud. I watched him, fascinated by how animated he got, how alive. He turned to me, holding up a collection of poems. "Maybe I should start writing again." I nodded. "I'd like that." You've got a way with words. That afternoon, wrapped up in the quiet hum of the city, we talked about dreams we'd kept buried. Jamie admitted he'd always wanted to write but was afraid no one would want to read his stuff. I encouraged him, telling him that what mattered was that it made him feel something real. Later that week, Jamie surprised me by emailing me a few of his new poems. They were raw and beautiful, full of hope, but tinged with the shadows he was still learning to face. One line stuck with me. "In your eyes, I find a place to fall, not into darkness, but into light." I texted him back, "This is incredible. I'm proud of you." His reply came quickly. "Thanks for believing in me." But as things were blossoming, the past wasn't done testing us. One night, a storm hit hard. Thunder rattled the windows, and the power flickered out just as Jamie was about to leave my place. I could see the unease creeping back into his eyes, the kind of fear that feels almost physical. "Hey," I said, pulling him closer. "You don't have to go. Stay here tonight. We'll keep the lights on with candles." He hesitated, biting his lip, then nodded. "I don't want to be alone." We lit some candles and settled onto the couch, the flickering light casting shadows that danced on the walls. Jamie leaned into me, his breath warm against my neck. "I hate storms," he admitted. "They bring back memories of being trapped, of not being able to escape." I wrapped my arm around him tighter. "You're safe here. I'm not going anywhere." He closed his eyes and let out a shaky breath. And I realized that sometimes safety isn't about fixing the fear. It's about being there through it. The storm passed, but the moment lingered. Jamie stayed a little closer that night, and I felt the weight of what we were building, something steady, real, and worth fighting for. A few days later, Jamie suggested we try something new, a dance class. I was skeptical at first. Me, dancing? But he looked so excited that I couldn't say no. The studio was small and bright, with mirrors lining one wall and upbeat music filling the air. We fumbled through the steps, laughing when we stepped on each other's feet or lost the rhythm. At one point, Jamie pulled me close for a slow dance. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, the world outside the studio faded away. "I'm glad you're here," he whispered. "Me too," I said. That night, as we walked home, hand in hand, I realized that Jamie was slowly letting go of the walls he'd built around himself, and I wanted to be the one who helped him tear them down, one brick at a time. But just as I was starting to believe in us, I noticed Jamie becoming quieter again. He'd pull away slightly in moments when I reached for his hand or tried to hold him close. It wasn't sudden, but subtle enough to make me wonder. One evening after dinner, I finally asked, "Hey, is something bothering you?" He looked at me, eyes conflicted. "I'm just scared. Scared that I'll mess this up, that I'll lose this. Us," I sighed, pulling him onto the couch beside me. "No one's perfect. We're both scared sometimes. But that's okay. We figure it out together." Jamie rested his head on my shoulder, a quiet vulnerability settling between us. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered. "You won't," I promised. We sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, knowing that love isn't always easy, but it's worth fighting for. And as the city lights twinkled outside, I realized that with Jamie, I was ready to face whatever came next, because sometimes feeling safe means being brave enough to fall. Months had passed since that quiet conversation on the couch, and slowly, piece by piece, we built a rhythm together. Jamie wasn't perfect. He still had his moments of fear and doubt, but he was learning to lean into trust rather than run from it. And I was learning how to be patient, how to hold space for someone who had spent so long without it. One evening, we found ourselves back at that little used bookstore, the one where he'd first talked about writing again. The owner was hosting a small open mic, and Jamie had insisted we go. I could tell he was nervous, but also excited in that unmistakable way he got when he was about to share something real. When his turn came, he stood up, hands shaking just a little, and read aloud a new poem. It was about finding shelter, not just physically, but in someone else's presence. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of everything he'd been through, and the hope he was finally allowing himself to feel. Listening to him, I realized how far we'd come. From strangers to confidants, from guarded to open, we'd turned fear into something tender and resilient. After the reading, as we walked home beneath a sky dotted with stars, Jamie reached for my hand and held it like he never wanted to let go. I squeezed back, feeling that quiet certainty in the simple connection between us. At my apartment, we settled on the couch, the city humming softly outside. Jamie looked at me, this mixture of vulnerability and strength in his eyes. "I'm still scared sometimes," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm not afraid of us." I smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. "Neither am I." We sat there for a long while, wrapped in each other's arms, the kind of warmth that comes from knowing you found a place to rest. That night, as he fell asleep beside me, I thought about the journey we'd taken, from cautious beginnings to this steady, quiet love. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was real, and it was ours. And sometimes, that's more than enough.